I ate prison food for 24 hours. You won't believe what they served, said in Rikers Island, New York City. The first thing you notice about Rikers Island isn't the fences, it's the silence. A heavy, unsettling quiet that sits just behind the hum of helicopters, the distant horns from the East River, and the metallic clatter of a world that never really sleeps. Even though it's technically part of New York City, Rikers feels like it exists on another planet, sealed off, forgotten, and suspended between justice and survival. I had been granted access after 3 months of negotiation. The idea was simple on paper. Spend 24 hours inside Rikers and eat only what the inmates are served. No outside meals, no bottled water, no hidden snacks, just the same trays, the same portions, the same experience. But nothing about this place is simple. My camera crew wasn't allowed beyond the visitor's wing. I would carry a small chest-mounted recorder and an audio mic, approved by the Department of Correction. Everything else, my phone, my watch, even my notebook, was locked away. I was stripped down to state-issued beige clothing, a pair of rough canvas shoes, and a wristband marked temporary. Keep your head down, don't make eye contact too long, and don't complain about the food, one officer advised as we crossed the final checkpoint. His tone was half warning, half pity. The door clanked behind me with the sound of a freight train coupling. Ahead was a long corridor of white and gray, fluorescent lights flickering like old motel signs. A smell hit next, bleach, metal, and something faintly sour. That was the cafeteria, I was told. Breakfast was being served. Scene 1, the first meal. Breakfast at Rikers begins before sunrise. At 4:30 a.m., inmates line up single file to collect metal trays. When my turn came, the guard serving didn't look up. He slid the tray forward with a dull scrape. On it sat a scoop of watery oatmeal, 1 hard-boiled egg, and a slice of bread that looked like it had been thawed twice. It wasn't the appearance that struck me, it was the temperature. Everything was cold. The oatmeal clung to the spoon like glue. The egg was gray around the edges, and the bread tasted faintly of disinfectant. An inmate sitting across from me noticed my hesitation. He had deep creases under his eyes, the kind that don't come from age but from years of concrete ceilings and fluorescent lighting. "Don't chew too slow," he muttered. "They think you're new. Fast means you belong." I swallowed hard and nodded. Around me, the room echoed with metal utensils clanging against trays, low voices, and the buzz of overhead lights. Some inmates ate in silence. Others traded packets of ketchup or sugar like currency. In a place where everything was stripped away, time, privacy, even flavor, these small trades became a kind of survival ritual. When I asked one man what he thought of the food, he laughed. "Food," he said. "Man, this is fuel. That's it. You eat it so you don't faint." He was right. By the time breakfast ended, I wasn't full, just aware. Aware of the mechanical rhythm of Rikers life. The way meals were less about nutrition and more about maintaining order. By noon, the gray cafeteria had transformed into something louder. Guards moved faster, voices rose, and the smell of reheated vegetables filled the air. Lunch at Rikers was served with the same precision as breakfast. Line up, collect, sit, eat, move. Today's tray carried something called soy loaf, a dense, brown rectangle that looked like meatloaf but tasted like chalk and salt. Beside it was a spoonful of mashed potatoes, peas, and a cookie, so dry it could break if you looked at it too long. I sat beside a young man named Jermaine. He'd been here 8 months, waiting for trial. He said the food was worse on weekends, when supplies ran low. "They call this meat substitute," he said, tapping the loaf with his spoon. "We call it the brick." I asked him how he managed to eat it every day. He shrugged. "You stop tasting it after a while. It's just another thing you do to get through the day." He told me stories of men trading their desserts for packets of instant noodles smuggled from commissary, of others who'd skip meals entirely just to avoid the stomach cramps. Nutrition reports from the Department of Correction say Rikers meals meet federal standards. 2,500 calories a day, low sodium, balanced nutrients. But on the tray, none of that felt true. Each bite felt like a quiet reminder of what bare minimum looks like in the real world. By the time dinner rolled around, the sun was gone and the air outside the facility had cooled. Inside, the heat clung to the walls. The final meal of the day arrived around 5 p.m., a scoop of overcooked rice, stewed beans, a single piece of chicken so thin it looked translucent, and a carton of milk. I sat at the edge of the cafeteria, recording quiet notes into my mic. Around me, inmates joked, argued, and compared portions. Some guards stood by the exits, arms crossed, faces unreadable. An older man at the table leaned in. "You're not going to finish that?" he asked, pointing at my chicken. I shook my head. He grinned. "Then you ain't hungry yet." He took the piece without hesitation, tore it in half, and shared it with the man next to him. For a brief moment, there was a sense of camaraderie, an unspoken bond formed not by friendship, but by scarcity. When dinner ended, I was escorted back to a small observation cell to rest. No mattress, just a cot and a thin blanket. I could still taste the food, metallic, bland, slightly sour. My stomach felt heavy, yet I was strangely still hungry. Through the small window, I could see the faint glow of the city skyline, freedom, just across the river, glittering like a mirage. Lying on the cot, I replayed the day's events through the hum of distant chatter and echoing footsteps. It wasn't the food that broke me. It was what the food represented. Every meal was a reminder of how invisible these men had become. Rikers Island was built to correct, but the system felt like it was designed to forget. The trays, the portions, even the taste, all engineered to maintain order, not dignity. I thought about the faces I'd seen. The young man joking about the brick, the older inmate splitting his chicken, the guards staring through glass like observers in a museum of lost time. For them, 24 hours was nothing. For me, it felt like a lifetime compressed into one day. When the lights dimmed at midnight, I whispered into the recorder. If food is the language of care, then here, silence speaks louder. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware, uninterested, and entirely too close. The second morning began with the same clang of metal on metal, that unmistakable sound of trays being stacked and pushed through the serving hatch. My body felt heavier, slower, and strangely hollow. 24 hours wasn't over yet, but I already understood something. Hunger inside Rikers Island wasn't just about food. It was about control. When I walked into the cafeteria, the fluorescent lights buzzed louder than usual. The air was thick with steam from the industrial kitchen, where workers in hairnets shoveled food into trays with mechanical precision. The first thing I saw on the line that morning was a giant tub labeled grits. They poured it like cement, thick, pale, and clumpy. One spoonful dropped onto each tray, followed by a piece of bread and a cup of powdered orange drink. The guards stood nearby, checking off head counts, their faces expressionless. I took a seat near the far corner of the room, close to the narrow window that barely let in the morning light. The first bite tasted like nothing, absolutely nothing. Just texture. The bread was cold again, like yesterday, and the drink tasted like diluted sugar water. "Don't look like that," said a voice from behind me. It was Jermaine again, the young man I'd met the day before. He slid his tray across the table and sat down. "You expecting a 5-star meal?" he asked, smirking. I laughed weakly. "No, I just didn't think it'd be this bad." He shrugged. "Welcome to Rikers." Jermaine told me he used to work in the kitchen detail. Every morning, he and a few others were up before dawn, cracking open boxes, heating cans, and preparing meals under the watchful eyes of correctional officers. "They tell you not to touch anything," he said, "but you still gotta taste, just to make sure it ain't gone bad." Once, we got meat that smelled so foul the whole kitchen stopped. They just told us to boil it longer. He paused, glancing around before continuing quietly. "Boil it longer. That's the answer for everything in here." By noon, I was taken to the rear of the cafeteria for a brief look at the kitchen area. It was massive, stainless steel tables, deep freezers, storage rooms stacked with canned goods. But what caught my attention wasn't the space, it was the smell. Everything smelled faintly of bleach, onion, and something old. Workers in beige uniforms moved quickly, scooping vegetables from industrial tubs, stirring vats of soup the color of rust. A correctional officer explained that Rikers serves nearly 30,000 meals a day. Most of the food arrives frozen or pre-cooked from a supplier in upstate New York. It's heated, portioned, and distributed on strict schedules. "Everything here's about timing," the officer said. "Meals are part of the control system. You delay lunch by 10 minutes, you get a riot." Behind him, an inmate worker carried a tray of what looked like cornbread. except it was pale and flat. He set it down near the steamer and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. His face was young, but already worn. "People think we don't care," he muttered. "But we eat this too." That line stuck with me. We eat this too. For all the talk about punishment and reform, even the workers were part of the same system, trapped in a cycle of barely edible meals and routine survival. Lunch that day was chili, the kind that came in bulk, cans labeled meat and beans. It looked more like a reddish paste, thick and oily, with pieces of soy and corn floating inside. A single apple and a packet of crackers completed the tray. By this point, I had started observing the trade system, the unofficial economy that revolved around food. One man swapped his apple for an extra cracker packet. Another offered a week's worth of milk cartons for a single pack of instant noodles smuggled from commissary. I watched as Jermaine traded half his chili for a honey bun someone had saved from yesterday's breakfast. "People talk about gangs running Rikers," he said. "Nah, it's the food that runs this place." He wasn't joking. Every exchange, every bite, every saved cookie was a form of power. The more you had, the more control you earned, and control was the one thing nobody wanted to lose. When I asked Jermaine what the worst meal he'd ever had was, he didn't hesitate. "Chicken patty Tuesday," he said. "Looks fine, smells fine, but if you bite too deep, you might find something you don't want to know about." I didn't ask for details. Some truths were better left unspoken. By the afternoon, I was starting to feel it, the weakness creeping into my limbs, the dull ache in my stomach, and the fatigue that made every step heavier. I wasn't starving, but I wasn't satisfied either. It was a strange, lingering emptiness that came not from lack of food, but from the food itself. I asked one of the officers if the meals were ever improved based on complaints. He chuckled. "Complaints? You get more complaints about TV channels than food. Nobody here expects comfort." He wasn't being cruel, just honest. Comfort wasn't part of the equation. The food was a tool, a system of discipline disguised as nutrition. That night, dinner came early again, around 5 p.m. This time, the tray held white rice, a scoop of turkey stew, and canned carrots. I noticed that every inmate added hot sauce or salt if they could get it. Anything to cut the taste. I sat across from the same older man from yesterday. He ate silently, head down, slow and deliberate. When he finished, he leaned back and looked at me. "You doing this for some show, right?" he asked. I nodded. He smiled sadly. "Just remember, when you leave, this still keeps going. We'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that, and the food'll still taste the same." That night, back in my cell, I couldn't sleep. The sound of distant shouting and the hum of the air vent filled the silence. My stomach growled, but I wasn't sure if it was hunger or just my body protesting what I'd fed it. I reached for my recorder again. The red light blinked weakly in the dark. "This isn't just about eating prison food," I whispered. "It's about how systems forget the people inside them." The truth was, the food wasn't made to nourish, it was made to occupy. A full stomach meant less chaos. Blandness meant less argument. Predictability meant control. I realized that even my brief, voluntary stay had changed me. The rhythm of the meals had shaped my day, dictated my energy, and dulled my senses. If 24 hours could do that, what would years feel like? As the faint glow of the city skyline flickered through the narrow window, I felt the same thought return, sharp, heavy, and impossible to ignore. Maybe the real punishment here wasn't the confinement. Maybe it was the silence between meals. The final morning inside Rikers didn't start with hunger, it started with noise. Metal clanks, distant yelling, doors slamming shut. The kind of sounds that don't shock you anymore because you've stopped expecting peace. I had been inside for less than 2 days, but it already felt like I had been here a week. Breakfast came before sunrise again. The same trays, the same lifeless oatmeal, the same slice of bread that curled at the edges. But something had changed, not the food, not the room me. The first bite didn't make me flinch this time. The flavor didn't surprise me. My stomach didn't rebel. I had adapted. My body had accepted the taste of confinement. And that realization was somehow more disturbing than the hunger itself. Across the table, Jermaine nodded at me with a small grin. "You're eating like one of us now," he said. I smiled weakly, unsure whether it was a compliment or a warning. Around us, the cafeteria buzzed like it always did. Forks scraping trays, quiet talk, the hum of industrial vents overhead. The guards looked bored. The inmates looked tired. Life went on, slow, repetitive, and endlessly gray. I had begun to notice a pattern. The way every tray looked almost identical, every portion measured down to the gram. It wasn't about cost efficiency. It was about order, predictability, control. Food inside Rikers wasn't meant to comfort. It was meant to regulate. It was one of the few constants in a world built on uncertainty. Inmates didn't know when their court date would come, if they'd be transferred, or if their appeals would ever be heard. But they always knew what dinner would look like. And maybe that was the point. When you strip life of choice, you strip it of power. An older officer I spoke to later that morning confirmed it in a quiet tone. You keep the food routine, he said. You keep the peace. You change the food, even once, people notice. You can start a fight just by swapping Tuesday's chili for Thursday's loaf. He wasn't exaggerating. A 2019 report from the city's Department of Correction listed meal-related incidents as one of the most common triggers for inmate unrest. Something as small as a missing milk carton could unravel an entire block's order. That fact haunted me as I watched the trays slide across the counter. Silent, mechanical, endless. By lunchtime, the fatigue had settled deep in my bones. My body wasn't starving, but it felt empty, like I was running on fumes. Today's menu was spaghetti with tomato sauce and a small square of cornbread. Jermaine sat beside me again. His energy seemed different. You ever think about how food changes who you are? He asked. I nodded. Back home, he said, I used to cook with my grandma. She made rice and beans that could make you forget the whole world. Here, it's like eating air. No flavor, no memory. You stop tasting, and after a while, you stop feeling too. He stared at his tray for a long time before continuing. You get out one day, and even real food don't taste right no more. You taste the salt, the spice, but it don't hit the same. Rikers changes your tongue and your head. That line stayed with me. Rikers changes your tongue and your head. Maybe that was the truest thing anyone said the whole time I was there. Because prison food wasn't just about what you ate, it was about what you lost. Taste, joy, choice, humanity. Each bite was a quiet reminder of what freedom felt like, precisely because it no longer existed here. Dinner came early again, just before 5 p.m. It was supposed to be my last meal inside. The tray carried white rice, pale green beans, and a chunk of something labeled turkey loaf. It looked like pressed clay, shaped into a square. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the room. I sat in silence, staring at the food. For a long time, I didn't touch it. Jermaine noticed. You gotta eat, man. Rule number 1, don't ever go hungry in here if you don't have to. I'll be out tomorrow, I said quietly. He smirked. Yeah, and I won't. So eat it for me, at least. So I did. Slowly, mechanically, like everyone else. The rice was sticky, the loaf bland, the beans soft and tasteless. But for the first time, I didn't think about how bad it was. I thought about how much worse it could be. When the meal ended, Jermaine stood and collected his tray. You'll talk about this place, right? He asked. I will. He nodded once, then disappeared into the line, swallowed by the sea of beige uniforms. That night, I lay on the thin cot again, the same way I had on my first night. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't threatening. It was heavy, full of all the things that went unsaid inside these walls. I listened to the distant echoes, a guard's footsteps, a cell door closing, the faint buzz of electricity running through old lights. Everything at Rikers had a sound, except the food. The food was always silent. It didn't scream for attention or comfort. It didn't rebel or protest. It simply existed, bland, constant, unchanging, like the heartbeat of the prison itself. And that silence, I realized, was the most powerful thing here. Because silence, repeated long enough, becomes normal. It becomes part of you. I turned to the recorder one last time. The red light blinked in the dark. The taste of Rikers isn't salt or spice or meat. It's the taste of time, slow, quiet, and endless. When morning came, the gate opened for me. The guard handed me my personal items, my phone, and a brief nod of acknowledgement. Good luck out there, he said. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner, almost foreign. The noise of traffic on the bridge was like music. I looked back once, at the gray outline of the complex, the towers, the barbed wire catching sunlight like silver threads. Behind those walls, breakfast was already being served again. The same trays, the same oatmeal, the same orange drink. And somewhere in that cafeteria, Jermaine was sitting down, eating without a word. In the end, I didn't walk out of Rikers with footage that shocked people. I walked out with understanding. Prison food isn't just about hunger or health. It's about what happens when you take away choice. It's about how people adapt when survival becomes routine. It's about dignity and what it feels like to live without it. Most people imagine punishment as violence, bars, or handcuffs. But the real punishment, the one that lingers, is much quieter. It's the taste of bland food day after day, until you forget what flavor even means. I spent just 24 hours eating prison food. But for thousands of men and women inside, this is their life. 3 trays a day. Every day. No change, no color, no flavor, just survival. And that's what they don't tell you about prison food. It doesn't just feed you. It reshapes you.